Welcome in, everybody. Happy Tuesday, and Texas football season is back. Longhorns had a coach's availability today. Coordinators, Pete Kwiatkowski on defense, Kyle Flood on offense, Jeff Banks on special teams, plus breakouts with all of the positional coaches. It's the only time we'll get a chance to speak to them really all year long. So good conversations today. CJ and I were both there, and we'll dive in to what we learned. And you can certainly ask questions about that you have about each position or coordinator and what we may have gleaned, because there was a lot of information over a couple of hours over at the 40 acres. That's going to lead to the first practice for the Longhorn football season tomorrow afternoon in the heat of the Texas summer, as it's over 100 degrees today here in Austin, Texas. But football season is here. It'll be 31 days tomorrow. And how are we doing, guys? We ready? I mean, it's still talking season, but it's actually practice season, which is a good thing. That's better than the no football thing.
Yeah, these are great talking points. So you're getting to hear from coaches and coordinators about the actual team. And I'm still I'm kind of blown away, and I'm very complimentary of Sark and his staff, because like him, they're very transparent about a lot of things. Like they answer your questions. A lot of times you just get coach speak when you ask a really good question. Now these guys actually answer questions, so we got some meat to talk about. I mean, they got to a lot of things that I think were really compelling that we had been discussing in the offseason about edge and linebacker position and secondary. So I can't wait to hear you guys' thoughts about it.
Well, yours too, Rod, because and I think, and you can address this, CJ, because I know it was a theme today, but the return of Pete Kwiatkowski for year 5, Kyle Flood for year 5, Jeff Banks for year 5. Hopefully our audience tonight and on Texas football family realize how rare that is. Texas is the only school in the Power 4 and Notre Dame that has all their coordinators back, for this many years. Big Ten had 13 teams change out at least one coordinator last season. Big 12 had 10, ACC 9, SEC 6. Notre Dame, they also had a coordinator move on, Al Golden. Meanwhile, even the Longhorns' first opponent, Ohio State, is replacing both coordinators. So, I mean, maybe that goes to what Rod's talking about, TJ, with the transparency that, they're comfortable with this media. They're comfortable in this market and, with their roster, and there's nothing really to hide. It's all out in front of them.
Yeah, definitely. And for Texas, look, they get to start fall camp tomorrow for the 5th time with everybody on the same staff, right? And that means your strength coach, Tori Beckton, who did a great job over the summer, and then all 3 coordinators, and, of course, Steve Sarkisian. And look, we got to hear from each coordinator today and why they opted to, 1, stay in Austin, but 2, kind of offer up their own thoughts as to why they feel like this is a place they want to stick around. And first and foremost, they talk about it's a fun place to work, right? University of Texas, Austin, Texas, that's something where they like to be. They enjoy this staff. And of course, building towards that national championship. They're close, right? 2 years in a row, Final Four team in the country. They're close. And now they feel like this is a team that can get over the hump. But on top of that, it is so important for Texas to not just retain these guys who are in charge of the X's and O's, but also those relationships and building the staff around them, right? Position coaches, analysts behind the scenes. All in all, that's building towards what we believe to be a very talented roster and program this upcoming fall. And the thing is, I continue to be very impressed by is even when you add or swap out position coaches, as Texas has had to do, their message to the roster, making sure that the vision remains the top priority. That's been the highest, priority for these guys that I've seen as well. So it's been really impressive. On top of that, Steve Sarkisian picking the right guys to be a part of his program, ultimately going to help them get to a quick start in fall camp once again.
Yeah, they kind of start on third base tomorrow. I mean, they're totally installed. A lot of returning players and a lot of young faces and new faces, but still, it's the same message that they've heard. Rod, you were a part of that. I remember covering Mac Brown's first 5 to 10 years, and Mac was old school. Tom Osborne, Joe Paterno. You keep your staff together, right? You keep your guys, and you played within that realm. There was a Carl Reese turnover at one point as he retired, but for the most part, Mac kept that core, and I think it's something we saw that wasn't happening after Mac kind of lost the program in the early 2000s, had to let go of everybody, Charlie Strong, Tom Herman. They never had that continuity. It was such a constant change out. You played, though, when Mac Brown had the total continuity. You know how important that is, just coming back from the summer, and it's the same as it's been.
Same message, right? Same communication, same terminology, same style of teaching. So I think, and oftentimes for the players, when you have that consistency, then you can consistently and confidently rely on them to carry out your message. All right, and that they can actually coach the younger guys because they're not learning. They've now become almost, professorial, if you will, in their knowledge of the system and how what coach expects and how practice is supposed to go and all these little things. As a coach now, you don't have the burden of having to reteach those things all the time. You have leaders now that can carry out your orders and your values as a coach. So I think that's what's important too. Now you can really establish leadership structure in those rooms because guys are learning the same consistent message year after year. So you gotta applaud. I mean, there's nothing like this in college football. I mean, you just said it, right? What program has all their coordinators together for 5 straight years? It doesn't happen even to bad programs because you're gonna fire one of those guys, all right? Because you want to improve, but even for really good programs, because those coordinators end up leaving and going to other jobs. So it is really rare. I mean, I'll give Sark a lot of credit. It's Texas and Sark, and also the Sark's methodology, which is he's a coordinator. He's calling the plays. He's a play caller, head coach. So you're not going to lose that guy ever. But he's been able to keep Kyle Flood and PK and Jeff Banks around, and that is truly remarkable. And Torrey Becton, put him in there too. That's important. It's the same message from every aspect of the program and the consistency of it. It's got to pay huge dividends. I think it has. I think it will continue to do that.
No question. We got to see that again today as the coordinators were available. We'll take your questions and thoughts if you have one with the availability today. CJ, what was your takeaway from Kyle Flood's response to your question about the third quarter? I knew that would come up, CJ, as I was standing there, because the Longhorns had a third quarter problem last year. We know that. Didn't seem like Kyle Flood, I don't know if he didn't recognize it, but he didn't pay it much mind, did he? Or are you just kind of thought that we try to execute all game long?
Yeah, and I know I kind of put Coach Flood on the spot a little bit on that one, but I feel like as much as we talk about the red zone, we need to be focusing on third quarters, right? Texas was straight up bad in a lot of third quarters a year ago. I've got some of the numbers, but following, from Vanderbilt on, Texas did not win a single third quarter until the Cotton Bowl. They either tied or lost that quarter, and a lot of times it was pretty darn ugly, right? You don't score against Kentucky, you don't score against Texas A&M. Georgia goes on a 10-0 run in the SEC championship game, and of course, let's not even bring up the Peach Bowl against Arizona State, in which you had a combined 7 yards, 6 yards. I mean, it was a pretty ugly reoccurrence for the Longhorns in 2024, and I don't know if that had been as much of a priority as maybe I'm making it out to be behind the scenes. But look, it was something that I certainly felt like hindered the Longhorns' ability to pull away from teams, and against great teams like your Georgias, like your Ohio States, like your Arizona States, it created basically a log jam in which you were unable to pull away and really dominate games in which it maybe felt like you were about to in the first half.
Yeah, I'm assuming behind the scenes, the analysts have this, and then, maybe you did surprise Kyle Flood with that question today, but they have to be better, Rod. I mean, there's adjustments being made on one side, maybe not on the other. I'm assuming Sark and both sides of the ball are aware of it coming into the year, especially with tough road trips like Columbus in 32 days and Gainesville. The OU game is going to be more tough this year, no question. Traveling to Athens, Georgia, all season long, you got to be better. You can't take a quarter off, essentially.
Yeah, last year I do think it was somewhat of an outlier because they were so bad. Texas has never. Sark hadn't been great coming out of the half, guys. That's going back to 2021. Remember the first year he was there, they'd get these big leads, and then they give up these big leads because coming out of the half, Sark would win the battle of game planning preparation, but often lose the battle of adjustments. He's gotten much better at that chess match within the game. But to me, it wasn't shocking because I remember when Sark kind of struggled with that coming out of the half early on as a play caller and a head coach here at Texas. So I think that was just some of that. And it's somewhat alarming just because, all the talent you have and, of course, the coaching acumen, continuity we just talked about. You'd think you'd be able to win more of the battle of adjustments. But Texas is not necessarily winning. I would kind of how CJ put out probably 50-50 that you're winning that battle of adjustments coming out of the half into the third quarter as well. So I think it's something that they got to work on. And I would put it in there with the red zone category, in my opinion. I've seen it be an issue multiple seasons at Texas, and Sark has only been here 4. So if
Yeah.
I've seen it multiple seasons at Texas, and you've been not just below average, but poor. You've been a poor red zone team. You've been a poor third quarter team in multiple years. Then then it's something maybe that's something that's worth looking at a deeper dive. It could be something that's within the system, culture, method, whatever. It's worth looking at if it's not an outlier. Like the turnovers thing this year, Texas was bottom 10 teams and worst teams in the country in taking care of the football. In terms of the giveaway rate, they just had a lot of turnovers. I mean, they were really careless with the football between Quinn and between Jaden Blue and some of the other guys. But that hasn't been a major issue for Texas. Every year Sark has been here or in multiple years. So I think that's kind of an outlier. And I think it'll be cleaned up a little bit with a new quarterback. And Jaden Blue is explosive he was. He had issues with ball security, him being off campus as well. But the red zone in third quarter, and I would throw third down in there too. Third down, you had been bad, but you haven't ever really been good.
Yeah.
And with all the weapons you have, you should be good on third down at one point. You got an NFL streak unlike any other team in college football the last 2 years, and most of those have been on offense, I believe, right?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot
I
of
think
them, right?
a majority, yep, more than the defense. But both sides have been represented. But you're right about that. And to your point about outlier, Rod and CJ, you can pick this up. We'll move on and we'll get into some of the specific coordinator conversations. Also, special teams was poor last year. We'll talk about what Jeff Banks had to say about fixing the special teams in all phases. But the outlier thing, to your point, Rod, I mean, the A&M game, Quinn Ewers turned the ball over at goal to go a couple times in that third quarter, or else that game would have been different, right? I think about that game. The Georgia game, they flipped quarterbacks at the half, and they got to adjust to that. So there are certain scenarios where that happens, but as you said, it dates back to 2021, so it's got to be something rectified. One other thing before we move off the continuity of the coaching staff, Rod B, because one thing I think Sark and the coaches talked about it today, that and he's talked about it through the spring, that he maybe learned from Nick Saban most specifically. The head coach has to coach the coaches because he's got new coaches coming in at running back and at cornerback, and Dwayne Akina's back, and all for Texas, but new to this program. The coaches have to coach the coaches, right? The coordinators coach the coaches to make sure the message is the same. To your point, like in every room, it's the same message. We're not disparate on what we're talking about. The message from the top is the message to everybody. So I think I learned that from Nick Saban, and you hear it from Sark a little bit. The head coach has to be really hard on his coaches to make sure they're coaching really hard and spreading the same message.
Yeah, they do, and that's been a strong message, Rod. I'll let you get your thoughts here in a sec, but I wanted to share a little bit about Coach Akina speaking today. Aaron, I'm sure you saw it. They gave each side of the ball about 15 minutes to speak in terms of their assistant coaches. Once the offense spoke, it was the defense. And then once the defense was done, well, Coach Akina sat there for probably 5 extra minutes just sharing stories of what it was like to be back. And hearing from Coach Orfe, who grew up a Texas fan, wanting to coach at the University of Texas after he got into his coaching career. Well, now he's here. I got to talk to Kenny Baker about what it was like recruiting nationally. He said, well, we're the University of Texas, right? What do you not want at a university? We've got everything. So one of those things that when it comes to kind of living and breathing that Longhorn logo, these guys on the staff are doing just that. And they're doing so from the minute that they've stepped foot on campus. And that's something that you're certainly starting to see the benefits with in recruiting as well.
Yeah, I love the young energy, right, that Sark brought. I do think, and Sark has mentioned that it is intentional. You do have to have the right mix of wisdom and experience on that coaching staff, but also there's a young energy and a young hunger for young coaches who are up and coming and are making their way in the world, and you want to have the right mix of both. And I'll give Sark a lot of credit. I think he has a really good mix. I mean, you got guys who've been in the coaching world forever. I mean, 3 decades of coaching experience with, with guys like PK and Dwayne Nikita and all these guys. And, obviously, Coach Nansen is in that category too. But then you got those young, hungry cats who are like Kenoto Hudson, who's trying to make his way in the world, and Mark Orfe coming up too, trying to make his way, and now Alan Clark in that category. Kenny Baker, I would put in that category too. That I think is something that's underrated. Trying to find that right mix. Personality types too kind of fit into that, and coach. Nobody knows that except for Sark. What kind of guys are going to bring that juice, and what kind of guys you need, different temperaments that are going to help the team in different situations. But I'll give Sark a lot of credit for building coach that. That's underrated aspect of championship teams, dynastic runs. It might have been the most important factor or ingredient in Saban's dynastic run. It's just his ability to pick coaches. Sark being one of them. Like, no. This coach in this spot. And I give Sark a lot of credit. He hasn't missed very often. That's, he had that, he may have a couple questionable ones, but he's hitting about, he's about 90% success rate right now in hiring coaches.
Agreed. And I think that comes with having a clear vision for what you want, what the message is, and who fits that vision. And your point, Rod, of the combination of old and not old, but seasoned and experienced, along with the young guys who are young and hungry, because they can see that Terry Joseph just got a job in the NFL, and Tashard Choice just got a job in the NFL, and Blake Gideon just got a defensive coordinator's job at Georgia Tech. Not like these guys moved on to go down; they went up, and so these young guys want to elevate their careers too. And Texas is a good place to do that right now. No question about that. On Texas Football Tuesday Night Livestream, Coordinator Day today and Coaches Day. We'll go coordinator by coordinator coming up, and kind of the big questions for Kyle Flood, Pete Kwiatkowski, on how they're moving people around. Maybe the biggest piece of news is that the kid Spence is coming in from Arkansas, is going to be primarily an edge rusher right now. Maybe Trey more at the middle linebacker spot, or up linebacker. We'll talk about that and some of the things we learned that you need to know. But Rod, tell them about Andy Ludicky, always a great partner of ours on a Tuesday night as we get this thing rolling.
All right. Thank you very much to Andy Ludicky and his team. We appreciate him being a ongoing sponsor and supporting On Texas Football, and, of course, our Tuesday night live stream. If you're looking to diversify, you may be someone like myself that has their hands in different businesses. Well, Andy, he can help you diversify by finding you different businesses that will fit your time allotment and your financial goals. If you've been stuck in the corporate rat race with 2 weeks and no control over the money you make or your schedule in general, reach out to Andy today, and he'll take you through a process, a very detailed process that will help you find a business that will fit your time allotment and your financial goals. Franchise ownership isn't for everyone, but if you have a desire to take control of your financial future and your financial destiny, reach out to Andy today at myperfectfranchise.net. That's Andy at myperfectfranchise.net. And Andy will take you through a process that will help you secure your financial future. That's what he's all about. So thank you very much to Andy Ludicky and his team for sponsoring our team here at On Texas Football.
Thank you, Rod. All right. Thank you, Andy, too. Hey, CJ, you were there with Kyle Flood talking about, start with him. Obviously, he's the co-offense coordinator, so he can answer any question, and we'll get to receivers and the Arch Manning conversation. But his offense, main responsibility is offensive line with 4 new starters. What did you take away? It seems like Cole Hudson established at center, would not a surprise. DJ Campbell taking another step, and Trevor Gooseby playing left tackle. But he made it clear, and this was kind of a common theme to all the coaches today, positional flexibility, but also getting the best players on the field at each position. Kyle Flood was pretty clear about that. Whoever's going to be the best guard, the best right tackle, however we got to get our best 5 on the field, we're going to do that. What'd you take from the offensive line conversation? I know it's a big conversation among Texas fans.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, that's basically it. Get the best 5 on the field one way or the other. There's going to be a competition at right tackle between Brandon Baker and Andre Kojo. I think maybe we start to predict, or at least pencil in the lineup, in the offseason a little too much. We're just excited, right? We're excited to see what the product on the field will look like. And as a result, maybe get ahead of our skis just a little bit. But Kyle Flood reminded us, hey, there's still a competition ongoing. That's going to be Brandon Baker. That's going to be Andre Kojo. And look, it sounded like there might be a little bit more of that competition at left guard as well, whether it be a Nato Umeozulu coming in for his first year starting as a fourth-year guy at the University of Texas. What can a Nick Kibble do? Where does Nick Brooks fit in all of this as well? We know that he's been working at left tackle and figure Trevor Gooseby to be that undisputed guy at left tackle. But all in all, Texas is very healthy at that offensive line position. And, of course, it would be basically a disservice to the University of Texas in that football program if Kyle Flood, that offensive line unit, did not have the a basic competition to find those best five. And right now, that's where things are moving in that direction. Longhorns are certainly finding those guys. You feel good about Cole Hudson at center. DJ Campbell, we've talked about in the best shape of his career already this year. And then Trevor Gooseby, that athleticism. But right tackle, left guard, got those two spots circled as we enter fall camp.
No question. And there's a lot of good players in that role. For sure. If you have thoughts on the O-line, right, I want to hear them. But also, we mentioned wide receivers. We know Ryan Wingo, Chris Jackson today, the wide receivers coach, raving about him. That we know that Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams at Alabama get a lot of hype. But he said, don't sleep on this freak. He called him 6'3" and 210 and still runs 4'3", 4'3.5". He's going to be a big time player. But then every coach I heard, from the special teams coordinator to Kyle Flood to Chris Jackson, kind of singled out DeAndre Moore and called him Demo as a guy that is a leader. He's kind of like the heartbeat of the offense, and even on special teams right now. Ryan Niblett and DeAndre Moore got the call outs from Jeff Banks special teams wise. So don't sleep on DeAndre Moore opposite Ryan Wingo, Emmett Mosley, and then Parker Livingston, a guy that Kyle Flood talked about that. I remember his quote. He said he does everything right all the time. He's in the right place. He's doing things the right way over and over again. And then Ryan Niblett again mentioned as kind of that fifth wide receiver, but also Jeff Banks singled him out as a special teams demon for them in that arena. So those are kind of your top five. What do you make of this on the offensive side? This get the best five out there and go with it.
I think it's a philosophy that they're applying everywhere, right? I've talked about with Coach Aquino. I mean, it was something that he did when I was on campus. Your best five guys are going to play in the secondary, and that allows you to be very creative, how you mix and match that. And we'll talk about that. They're applying that on defense too, but I do think they want that approach. It makes sense, the offensive line. I mean, the secondary and kind of the offensive line are two groups that have to work in unison. They have to be hive-minded. Everybody kind of on the same page in that regard. And I think, trying to get your best five available, that's always a challenge. But if you got, say you got more better safeties than corners, say you got, more corners than you have safeties, you can always kind of figure out which one of those guys has another dimension to their skill set. And I heard Kyle Flood talking about this with the third tackle and the third guard. He was like, we're looking for a third tackle and a third guard. He said, we'd like it to be that cut and dry. But sometimes it's like, this guy's better on the right side, this guy's better on the left side. And you got to take that into account. But he said last year they not lucked out, but Trevor Gooseby's pretty much locked it down. He's like, I'm the third tackle. Right, left, wherever you need me, I'm your third tackle. Right, period. And so that helped him, right? So it's like, oh, hey, I know my third tackle. And now figuring out who your third guard is, I think the same thing is true at different positions, right? Like at receivers, Sark says all of your receivers are interchangeable. They all play all different positions. So you're just looking for your top four guys. Like, who are your top four receivers, period? And it seems like they know who those are. He said Parker Livingstone was going to carve out a role for himself. I wonder what that's going to be. Is that going to be red zone guy, third down guy? Is that going to be a deep threat? Who's that going to be in that offense? Even Sark admits they don't really know, guys. They don't know this stuff. They don't know till training camp. I was listening to a quote from Kenoto Hudson, and he was like, yeah, we'll find out who our best five are, but we'll find that out, in more confidence. Once training camp is underway, we'll figure out who our best five guys are in the secondary. I think they're looking at receiver the same way. Like they're looking at, obviously the offensive line the same way. We'll figure out who the best five are going to be once training camp starts. And once we get certain guys into an open competition to sort things out and to clarify things. So, we've been talking about how Texas doesn't have a lot of holes in the roster. They don't have a lot of, there's not a lot of liabilities on the roster, but there's still some open competitions right now on the roster. And that's what I can't wait to hear about in training camp.
Yeah, very clear from all the coaches that what we left spring with and sent off into the summer, we want to see it come back, and who really went to work and worked on the things we talked about, who took those steps forward. We'll get into some of the other surprising things that we learned. But CJ, you were there when Jeff Banks talked about who's going to return kicks. He mentioned Trey Wisner as a guy that maybe returns kickoffs. DeAndre Moore, Ryan Niblett, the main returners there. Were you surprised to see Jeff Banks single out Trey Wisner as a guy because of his speed and his trustworthiness, along with DeAndre Moore, a couple of starters that could be returning kicks on the specials?
Yeah, that was really the big thing for me is, look, the Texas staff, if they're going to throw you back deep, you have to have the trust of Jeff Banks, Steve Sarkisian, right? You got to be able to be trustworthy in this sense to go return punts and kicks. And I think Texas a year ago, they trusted who they had with Silas Bolden. That was a bit of a rocky road at times there. It felt almost like a roller coaster of emotions.
Edge of your seat.
He had, the anxiety levels inside DKR certainly rose when he was out there catching punts on the run. But that was certainly the way in which you have to earn your spot if you're a Texas Longhorn trying to get in the return game. And those three are really the guys that Texas is focusing on entering fall camp. That's, again, Trey Wisner, who did not return a year ago. Jeff Banks said, look, Steve Sarkisian and I had the conversation after C.J. Baxter and Christian Clark went down that all running backs were going to be off limits for special teams. We just simply can't have them being wrist injury in another facet that isn't in the backfield, right? Have to have them healthy. And fortunately, Trey Wisner was healthy a year ago. Otherwise, I think you would have seen Jaden Blue in a kickoff return situation at times. I know they tried to get him the ball in that instance in 2023. Point being, those are your three, and it led to a pretty interesting conversation as well. And a little tidbit that I picked up on, I don't know if it was intentional by Jeff Banks, but and Rod, I'd love to get your thoughts here, because when he says that Texas might be a little bit more aggressive coming after the punt, not trying to set up for those big punt returns, that tells me, hey, just get the ball to Arch Manning. We don't need the home run play on the return. Maybe we can get something essentially as a turnover with the blocked punt. I don't think it's because they don't necessarily view it as they don't have a Xavier Worthy, they don't have a Silas Bolden, they don't have a Keelan Robinson per se, a true game-changing return man at the moment. But more so they want to get more pressure on the punt game. If that's the case, it leads to one of two things. One, extra penalties in the punt game, right? Running and roughing the kicker, can't have those, right? It was one of those instances a year ago. Mo Blackwell should have had a blocked punt in one of the playoff games. Feels like he pulled up as he was closing in on the punter because he was perhaps a little frightened of drawing one of those penalties. You look at 2023, that TCU game at DKR was the big turning point in that game. It was a roughing the punter in which you barely grazed the punter. He sells it pretty well, and all of a sudden the momentum in that game completely changes. But that goes back to Jeff Banks' point of penalties and special teams, completely coachable, completely on the coaches to make sure that does not occur. They have to do a better job this year, and the players have to do a better job of executing that on the field, making sure that they're playing smart and within their assignment. So I thought that was really interesting that Texas might not be setting up for those home run returns in 2025, but more so fair catches, punt safe, but pressure on the punt team is going to be something that I think we see a lot about.
To your point, I think to add to your theory about, hey, let's just give Arch the ball and let him go to work. If he is indeed that special, which we all think he is pretty special. When you have an elite offense, we saw this in the Big 12, right? A lot. You can take chances in other phases of the game. When you know you're going to score a lot of points, like, man, we can take some chances on defense. It's okay. And I think Texas will do that actually this year because they believe in their personnel on defense, but also, is it possible Texas finally has an elite offense this year? We talked about this. Texas hasn't had an elite offense since Sark has been here, guys. They've had a top 25 offense, but not elite. I'm talking about top 10, top 5 offense in the country where, they're almost unstoppable at times on offense unless they stop themselves, even though we saw that a lot last year too. So to your point, CJ, I could agree with you. If they have a lot of faith that their offense is going to be better, improved on what it was last season, and even maybe the best offense since Sark has been here, if that is the case, then yeah, let's take some chances on special teams. Let's take some chances and make some plays. Let's flip the field position when we can. On defense too.
Yeah, without a doubt. And we talked about this young number one recruiting class and these young athletes. Dwayne Akina's impact on that potentially, because you said it, Rod, when Coach Akina was on the 40 acres the last time, special teams was a priority for him and his room too. Guys like Jonah Williams, guys like Grayson Littleton are guys that got singled out by Jeff Banks that can make plays like that on special teams. They may not impact the starting 11 or even the two deep right now, just how deep Texas is, but an athlete like Littleton or Jonah Williams or one of these guys, Lance Jackson was mentioned, they can make an impact on special teams because they're just go get the ball, go make a play, be smart about it. But those guys are long levered athletes that can make plays in the kicking game, both returning things, blocking kicks, recovering kicks. Those are really good players in that spot.
Yeah, I want to build on that, Aaron, because look, special teams, you're going to see a lot of freshmen. And I know that, look, Nick Townsend might be a punt block specialist, that Jonah Williams could be a punt block specialist, but where are you going to see a lot of these guys early on in their careers? It's going to be on kickoff, duty, making sure that you're running down the field as fast as you can, getting down there to earn the trust of your coaching staff, just like Trey Wisner did in 2023. But on top of that, who are your gunners going to be? And look, we heard Cade Phillips, we heard Grayson Littleton. Basically, every coach that spoke about that side of the football mentioned Grayson Littleton in some form or fashion. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, does a James Simon show up? Because we've seen a Texas running back be some piece of a special teams unit in every single year that this Jeff Banks, Steve Sarkisian unit has been around. So that's going to be really interesting. On top of that, I expect to see Xavier Phil-Sami. I expect to see Warren Roberson once again as gunners in punt coverage. But who can really stand out and be that special teams ace as a true freshman? That's going to be really interesting. Those couple of names that we've heard today, I've got circled. And again, it's Grayson Littleton, Cade Phillips, maybe a Jonah Williams. Where does he stack up? Bo Barnes was also mentioned as a guy that's going to be on kickoff duty at 240 pounds, running 10.9. I mean, who wants to step in and take try to block that kid running down at you 40 yards down the field? So that's going to be really interesting. But, yeah, that's going to be a great opportunity for those young cats to get on the field early through special forces.
It's going to be DBs. It's going to come from the DB room. It's got to, right? They got too many good athletes that are not going to immediately see the field. Guys like Jonah Williams, like just freaks. You got Zealous Hicks. You got Cade Phillips. It's got to be one of those young DBs. And I know how Coach Akina is about special teams. He wants his guys to be heavily represented on special teams. And I do believe that when Jeff Banks was asked, like, what does it take to immediately be able to contribute on special teams, I think he just said speed. He's like, I want guys who can run. You can run, and that's DBs. If you can run, then you can compete on Jeff Banks special teams.
He had 3 points. He's like, trustworthiness, we got to trust you. Not to hold and get a penalty or make a dumb play, but speed. And then, if you're covering, are you willing to tackle somebody? You're going to stick your face in there and tackle somebody just because you're fast. You got to you get yourself in the right place. You got to tackle, be physical. And I think they got a lot of those type of guys. So yes, agreed. One other note while we're on the offensive side of the ball, and then we'll flip over to the defense and talk about some of the things we learned from Pete Kwiatkowski, who's feeling pretty good about the toys he's got and all his coaches. How about the revelation from Jeff Banks today, CJ, that Jordan Matthews, the young tight end, is up to 260 pounds.
Oh, yeah.
That's, because Jack Endries is going to be your go-to tight end coming in from Cal. But he came in at like 218 from Langham Creek, and now he's 260. That's a big deal. I don't think anybody, realized that. That's a big boy all of a sudden that can be a sturdy, we know he's got a big catch radius. He's got big, long arms. He's been working in that Torrey Beckton room to, because he's a basketball player too in high school down in Houston. So stop playing basketball, start getting in the weight room.
Yeah, he absolutely did. And look, Jordan Washington, you look at where his body kind of started to take form a year ago. You're starting to think, okay, how big can he get? And sure enough, he got up to about 265. He had to slim down just a little bit. I think 255 is the ideal weight for him so he can maintain that speed. And as you mentioned, Aaron, that ability to go up and make plays on the football with that basketball background, but he's going to maintain that ability to be a vertical threat. And at that size, like that's more than heavy enough to chip on a Colin Simmons or Ethan Burke, some of those big edge rushers that you'll see in the SEC, which obviously allows for Jack Indries to be freed up as a nub tight end. I know that Jeff Banks kind of hit at the fact that he doesn't like to call his second tight end on the field, a H-back. He says, hey, look, when we go 11 personnel, that guy has to be your inline blocker. The role of a tight end isn't just dead set on being your inline or H-back situation. So for Jordan Washington to free up that ability to move a Jack Indries around in the offense, to maintain that vertical threat while also having two tight ends on the field, that's huge for Texas. And the way that we've seen a year ago, really over the last 4 years, with how much Sarkisian likes that 12 personnel package, now I think you're looking at the most complete and versatile 12 personnel package that you'll see at a given time. Because go back to 23. Yeah, you had Jatavian Sanders, but you really didn't have a lot out of Gunnar Helm, not at the same time on the field in 2023. And on top of that, I think you might be looking at a little bit more athleticism matched with that strength, right? JT Sanders had the athleticism. He didn't necessarily have the strength. He wasn't going to be a guy that sat in there in the trenches and moved people. I think Jordan Washington can do that. And with Jack Indries coming in, having 2 full years of play time already, certainly has the experience to go in there and do exactly that at his frame as well.
Kurt, Rod, I'd say one thing that we'll say about Duck Camp, but in your thoughts, this goes back to the very beginning of this conversation on a Tuesday night here on Texas Football, the continuity on the staff, to have a vision for a player who they saw the athleticism, saw the basketball skill, a tight end, but here he is a couple years into the program, and now he's over 250 into 260 pounds. They saw a vision for him, and now when it's his time, we all talked about it all offseason that they're kind of bare, the cupboard's bare at tight end. Coaches kind of had a different idea that we're gonna get this guy ready to step in for Gunnar Helm and Juan Davis.
Yeah, I mean, and you're coming off arguably the greatest tight end season in the history of Texas football with Gunnar Helm and what he just did. So the productivity is there because you're only the trajectory seems to be a linear one. You're only getting more and more productivity out of that tight end position after JT Sanders, then Gunnar Helm. Yeah, you don't have the experience, but I agree with CJ. He's right, man. The athletic profile overall now, I think, is different at tight end. I would even predict that in, let's say, maybe 2 years, say like, Arch's second year, you may get a 13 personnel package if Jack Indries ends up coming back, right? You get a Jack Indries and you got a Nick Towns and a Jordan Washington. You may get a 13 personnel package. But Sark ain't broke that out yet, right? He ain't got that because I don't think his tight ends have been this athletic. Right. So I think the next phase for the tight end position is let it be a little bit more balanced in the target share. I've talked about this. You've been very lopsided in your target share. Usually there's one receiving tight end and one blocking tight end for Texas. Everybody knows that. Juan Davis was that last year. It was Gunnar Helm when JT was here. You want both of those guys to be a threat. And I think that's going to be the next phase that both of Jordan Washington, he said Jordan Washington's a 3-down tight end. That's what he said today. All right, so if he's a 3-down tight end, we know Jack Indries is one of the best tight ends in college football. So you got 2 guys who could also be receiving threats down the field. When Sark, on average, plays 12 personnel, around 35% of his offensive snaps, then you are talking about taking another step. And then you can get to that play action, old school play action with Arch Manning at the helm with some delayed releases from both of your tight ends.
To build on that, to answer Charlie's question here, is Washington going to be more of that blocking tight end and Indries the downfield guy? To start, yes. I think when they're on the field together, that's where you'll see, that first immediate tight end opposite or next to one of the left or right tackles would be Jordan Washington with Indries as a nub. That's how I envision it early on. Now, Rod, to your point, that's obviously going to expand because Jeff Banks doesn't call tight ends 3-down guys if they don't feel like they can go out and execute all 3 downs. And again, Jordan Washington certainly has the athleticism to do so. What's going to be interesting is, Rod, you mentioned next year in terms of maybe seeing 3 tight ends on the field together. Look, I don't think it matters if Jack Indries returns or not. I think the staff really likes what they have with Jordan Washington. Obviously, Nick Townsend, who was very clear to see Jeff Banks just kind of blush about and just rave over what he has and gets to mold over the next 3 or 4 years. But also Amari Winston, who got to run with the first team in the spring. Again, only about 6'1.5", 6'2", but 240 pounds. That's your H-back if you have that position, right? So that's going to be your situational guy in which if you go to the heavy set, he could kind of be your in-motion, leading fullback kind of situation guy, but also someone that's a vertical threat and a threat in the passing game. really in 2026, I look at that tight end room. If it's not already this year, that's going to be as healthy as a tight end room we've seen at the University of Texas.
Yeah, they've attacked it, obviously, like a lot of positions they've attacked on the recruiting trail. But again, back to the continuity of each position and coordinator, they know what they're looking for. And now we're starting to see the fruits of that in this 2025 season that starts in 32 days. Hey, Rod, we'll pick it up and go defense here coming up with little Pete Kwiatkowski, Dwayne Akina, the new defensive coaches. But tell them about Duck Camp and the great gear they can get. Hunting season right around the corner.
Oh, no doubt about it. As a matter of fact, I got some new Duck Camp gear coming in, ready for football season. Folks, Duck Camp is made for the people that live for the moments out there where there are fish to catch, birds to hunt, and time to kill, and plenty of football to watch. They like doing all that stuff, so they built a company centered around that very principle, based in Austin and dedicated to giving people best-in-class hunting and fishing apparel. Duck Camp gear has been tested from the backcountry of Alaska to the dove fields of Texas, also ready to keep you cool and comfortable on those scorching hot summer days in Texas. We all are experiencing those right now. It will stand up to the toughest conditions, but also happily sit down beside a fire and drink a few cold ones if that's more your speed. And that's definitely more my speed. Some of their featured items include the new sun protection shirts, and they'll keep you cool and dry and comfy. They're available in camo and solid colorways, and their iconic Game Series hats that feel as timeless as hats found in your grandpa's garage. They got them in the clay colorway as well, the mallard hat and the pointer hat. I'll let you know right now that clay colorway is basically as close as you can get to burnt orange without getting sued or getting a cease and desist by the University of Texas. I got a lot of Duck Camp gear in that very color, and people always say, oh man, that's cool Longhorn gear. It actually isn't Longhorn gear, it's Duck Camp gear, but either same, they don't care. They appreciate the love either way. So shop for hunting gear at duckcamp.com. That's duckcamp.com. And thank you very much to Duck Camp for sponsoring our Tuesday night live stream.
No doubt about it. CJ, we saw some messages in a super chat. Did you get a parking ticket today?
This is ridiculous.
Hold on, where did you park? Because you're a vet.
No, I just kind of threw the car on the side of the road. So yeah, it was totally deserved. But yeah, tough start to the fall camp for me. We'll get that one situated a little bit later down the road. And Alan, don't pay it. I like driving my car around campus, man.
The boot. You get the boot.
Yeah, and I will not be going all, IG Hall with that one. I will not be doing
that. Nice.
Ricky Williams was the king of the parking tickets back in the day. If you remember that, Rod. I mean, that was Ricky Williams. We did like have stacks of them. He'd park his car up on the sidewalk. And
Sims got a bunch of them too. I remember Sims got a bunch of them. But you're right. He's known for literally parking his stuff like right by outside the class, like literally outside the building. He would own and not on the street, pull it up like you said, onto the curb and then park it there. It's like, well, you can't do that, Ricky. So
yeah. Oh, that was Ricky. He's late. He was late usually. All right, go back up there to that super chat because he had a question about defense, which leads us into our defensive conversation. With all the flexibility on defense, how much pre-snap movement do we expect to see to confuse opposing offenses? CJ, start with this, and then Rod, pick it up because PK was asked about the new rule where you can't have sudden movement right before the snap. We learned that for the SEC media days from the head of the officials, which is PK said that's going to be a judgment call, different officials, different plays. But answer the question from Scott. Thank you for the super chat, Scott. Appreciate that. Pre-snap movement, but not just the sudden movement on the D line, but so many guys who's standing up, who's coming. That's the confusion part is something that's going to be baked into this defense.
Yeah, PK's kind of a funny dude. And, we don't get to sit there and talk to him all too much. And so when you hear him and you see how his brain works, different words and different questions kind of get him to perk up a little bit more. And, oftentimes it's all just, hey, how's number 92 doing? How's number 27 doing as a DB? And he'll give you an answer, right? A lot of coach speak, but every now and then you'll see kind of a wire get tripped and something in his brain just kind of perks up. And it was a great question. Terry Middleton asked it. He said, coming from SEC media days in Atlanta, there's obviously the big SEC kind of officiating, head coordinator saying these are the new rules. We got a whole breakdown of the new rules in 2025. And one of them was quote unquote abrupt movement on the defensive line. And obviously you see guys before the snap move, shift, kind of move over one another. It looks like barrel roll drills almost at times with those defensive linemen. But if it's up to the officiating crew's discretion now, whether or not it's abrupt movement. And again, that leaves a very large room for error if you're going from crew to crew to crew. And when that question was asked today, PK kind of just rolled his eyes saying, hey, I don't know what to expect. And it was a lot of, I hate this idea as well, is kind of the way that I took it, saying, I don't know how to coach my defensive line, my linebackers to approach shifting, stunting, preparing for twists in a way that isn't necessarily abrupt, right? So the way that he described it is you cannot be moving forward to the line of scrimmage at the time of your movement in which it shifts or causes a false start for the offensive line. Now, again, that's up to the discretion of the officiating crew, and it will take some time to get fully used to. Now, it was pretty clear cut when the only rule was you couldn't clap, right? You got a linebacker sitting there, duplicating the snap count that causes an offensive lineman to jump. Now it's completely up in the air. And for PK, what's difficult here is you have so many different chess pieces that you could bring from different angles, different formation packages, that using those stunts and twists and that pre-snap movement, well, now you're hindered a little bit. You're working with one arm behind your back rather than a full arsenal of guys just playing games. And that's one of my favorite defensive front packages, Rod, is literally the games package. You got 3 stand-up defensive linemen. You got 4 linebackers all just kind of running around, basically looking like they're playing freeze tag by the line of scrimmage before the ball is snapped. And you just don't have any idea where they're coming from. So it's going to be interesting how they call this and how quickly it adopts across the country. But for PK, it certainly didn't feel like he was a huge fan of this new rule being implemented by the SEC.
Because it's nonsensical, because they can't even explain it with any clarity, and how you expect people to understand it when you can't even really explain it in my opinion, with any clarity, because I still really don't understand it either. So I'm with you. I think it's a terrible rule. I don't even know why they even say why at SEC Media Days they needed to come up with the rule. Was there an issue, some systemic problem, or they just decide they want to freestyle a new rule?
Rod, you know the answer to that.
Defense. They hate defense.
They hate defense.
I knew that. I was hoping it'd be something. I don't think they'd make up an excuse or something. But no, they just hate defense. They want higher scoring offense. Because this is honestly what Georgia did to Texas a lot.
Yeah.
If you basically got to look at it, Georgia was moving and shifting a ton on the defensive front. More so than they've done probably all year, and they did against Texas. And when they shift, they would often move guys from the second level, move them down to the line of scrimmage, right? And then end up giving them what they call a kind of a 5-man face, if you will, to force Texas to get, to force one-on-one blocking situations. So I don't know if that's considered abrupt. Do you have to give the offense a chance to, set the blocking, like set their pass protection then? Like, I don't understand what abrupt is. If I do it quickly, is that abrupt? Or if should I move slowly to give the offense a chance to know what we're doing? I have no idea how they're going to call it. It's crazy.
Something tells me that's going to be pretty, controversial come season time.
Yeah,
it's kind of like the whole rule about faking injuries and stopping clocks, and any judgment call you put in for the officials becomes controversial, right? Hands to the face or roughing the passer, or remember when they after the 2018 NFC Championship game, NFL put in the defensive pass interference rule, which it was a disaster. The more judgment calls these guys have to make, and as fast as the game goes, the more it's going to be a challenge.
Thank you, Joel.
There you go, Joel, with the On Texas Football Parking Fund. There you go. Nice work right there. Very good, because CJ had to be there and right up front. Hey, defense, guys. I mean, I think the takeaway, again, more positional flex. They're, secondary, defensive line. They're moving guys around, cross-training people. Start on the D-line with, Coach Kenny Baker and Le'Allen Clark now at the ends. They're really looking to, Brandon Spence, the kid from Arkansas coming in, is going to be primarily an edge player now, and then maybe that means Trey Moore, CJ stands up a little bit more and plays linebacker. What did you take from the defensive coaches you talked to as far as that, rotation and how the fronts are going to look?
Well, that's exactly it. Again, you have so many different chess pieces. The more that you're able to use them their versatility, you have ways in which you can create identification issues, out the wazoo for opposing teams. And that's where this staff is headed directionally. For Brad Spence, he's playing more of that jack. I think right now the plan is kind of to use him in a situation behind Colin Simmons. So it's going to be Ethan Burke on one side, Colin Simmons, and then Brad Spence right behind him as well. And then where does a Colton Vasek and Zena and a Justice Terry and a Lance Jackson figure in? We'll have to wait and see tomorrow. But you have so many different pieces. And the big conversation that I've seen on TexasFootball.com is, well, why do you move Brad Spence from linebacker to edge and then Trey Moore from edge back to linebacker? And it's a fair question. Look, both are about 6'2", 6'3", in that range, 240 pounds. But I think they're constructed a little bit differently in terms of their athleticism. I think Brad Spence is very heavy-handed. This is a guy that when he punches and engages at the point of attack on a blocker, he sheds very easily. I think for Trey Moore, he's more of that guy that might have to put a little bit of a finesse move to get around a block. And does that displace him from his gap? We'll have to wait and see. But I think in space, you see his versatility and his strength utilized a little bit more, whereas a Brad Spence will go hit a tackle at 6'6", 6'7", and it feels like a guy that's 6'5" or 6'6", right? So it's a heavy-handedness for Brad Spence that kind of outweighs that of Trey Moore, and why you're seeing them play basically a carousel with one another in their positions. So that was really interesting. And one more nugget I wanted to add from this, because look, everybody wants to hear about Justice Terry. They want to hear about Lance Jackson, right? 2 5-star level guys on the defensive line. Where are they factoring in right now? Well, according to Kenny Baker, it sounds like he and Alan Clark are going to have to come to an agreement. The Paris Climate Accord, whatever it is, some sort of agreement where they use both of those guys in each room at certain periods of practices throughout fall camp. Of course, Lance Jackson came in around 275 pounds in the winter. He went down about 25 pounds, right? He lost quite a lot from his frame and then built it up slowly throughout the summer as well. He's right now in the mid-260s, according to the Texas roster. He's starting at edge, as is Justice Terry, who at about 268 pounds is a little too light to be playing on the interior. Now, does that mean that they're going to only play on the edge during their career? Absolutely not. And Coach Baker even mentioned that today, saying, there are going to be times where we're going to spend 1 or 2 of them inside because, look, they're just too freaky. They're just too long. They're just too powerful. And at 275, if you can get to 280, that's a guy that can play that 3 technique in certain situations. You can spin him in, Rod, on those NASCAR packages and be that guy that mans a B gap or, line up in that 3 technique or 5 technique position with a tight end and be just fine. That's going to be really interesting. But all in all, so many pieces that Texas has on that front 7. It's going to be interesting to see who else kind of grows into that mold of guys that they can just kind of plug and play anywhere on that front 7.
Yeah. To your point about Brad Spence and Trey Moore, I was talking to Alex Okafor about this. He was talking about how they're just power rushers and speed rushers. He said, most guys end up in one of them 2 categories. A power rusher, speed rusher, and then you build your pass rushing moves and repertoire off of what your strength is, right? And he was he was a power guy and had to learn more kind of speed moves and that kind of thing. And I think that's kind of what you're saying about Trey Moore. Trey Moore's a speed rusher. Trey Moore's number one thing is he can get around the edge on you quick. And he builds his pass rushing repertoire off that. I've heard Trey Moore say his counter is the spin move. He'll counter with the spin because he's already upfield on him. And most of those tackles, they're going to overcompensate by thinking, oh man, Trey Moore's trying to get the edge on me. So they're going to overcompensate, and then he can easily get back inside with the spin move because speed is his thing. With a guy like Alex Okafor, he was talking about how he uses, he's talking about all these different moves where basically even the arm moving and the club move from Reggie White back in the day. But those are more power moves. And you were talking about how heavy-handed Brad Spence is. Some guys, they build their repertoire off of, I got power. So I'm gonna stab this hand in the middle of that tackle, and then after that, if he puts his hands up, I'm gonna be able to swim him, or I'll be able to club him when he's off balance. And they're building off of power, and I think that's the difference of kind of what CJ's talking about. Also, something interesting we were just talking about how Texas is, flipping, basically they're cross training all these guys on the front seven, and this is intentional, right? They won't necessarily admit it, but they're recruiting linebackers who can be pass rushers as well. And now they're cross-training their linebackers to be edge rushers and edge rushers to be linebackers. Ark even said Colin Simmons has got to learn some of this stuff. I do think it's intentional. I do believe ultimately, and matter of fact, the quote from, I'll make sure I get the quote right here because it was in the secondary. Here it is right here from Kenoto Hudson. He said, based on what they're going to do, this is the secondary, but I think it applies to the entire defense. He said it's going to be predicated on the offenses that we play throughout the course of the year. So based on personnel groupings that we see, we'll have the ability to match up for us. We'll be able to play with big personnel groupings, and we'll have a smaller sub-package personnel group that we can play with. He's talking about the secondary specifically, but I think that's where they're going to be at with the defense period. I think they're going to be very matchup specific, very personnel situation specific, because they're so deep at linebacker. They're so deep at edge. They're deep pretty much everywhere except, I guess, D tackle and maybe cornerback. But the corner's just unproven guys. And I think ultimately if they find corners that are proven, then that's going to be an added bonus. But I think ultimately they're going to construct this defense built on where their strengths are and where they're deep. And they're going to be able to play a lot of guys because they're going to have a lot of different personnel groupings and packages so that they can match up based on the identity of the opponent they're playing.
No doubt. And Pete Kwiatkowski was clear when asked about Trey Moore standing up. They're looking at him for the next level. They know that's going to help him with his toolbox for the NFL, and that's something they use on recruiting as far as developing players. We're going to well-round you to make sure you're Sunday ready as you possibly can be, because Pete Kwiatkowski was pretty clear that Trey Moore's skill set fits that at the NFL level, that he's going to be more of a stand-up box linebacker that can rush the passer.
Also throwback, because I was talking Jackson Jeffcoat. Remember Jackson Jeffcoat was the best pass rushers ever at Texas, defensive player of the year in 2013. Talked about that year when Greg Robinson put that spinner package in and was playing him at linebacker. They were basically playing him at the second level at linebacker and playing him at the edge position. He was playing both of them. And he said, I wish I'd had one more year with Greg Robinson in that package. He said it would have made me a better player for the next level at the NFL. Because when he got to the league, that's what everybody was doing. It was like, oh, yeah, you're kind of a tweener. We're going to put you at he said first started off as a 4-3 linebacker, and somebody else wanted to play a 3-4 linebacker, and he kept moving around. He said he wished he'd have done more of it at the college level. So to your point, E, that's been an age-old argument for pass rushers who are a little bit, I say multi-dimensional, I think is a better word to say. Yeah,
they're not just flat Colin Simmons, go get the quarterback. They're going to be a little bit more needed to be able to do a lot of different things in their toolbox at the next level. All right, let me tell you about our friends at Allstate and Mark Saunders, of course. Mark Saunders is a great partner of ours every Tuesday night. It's all about making sure everything is covered, and you go to sleep each night feeling good about where you are with your toys and your house and your cars and your kids' cars, everything, homes, cars, boats, motorcycles, RVs, ATVs, second houses if you've got them. It's had floods and everything that we dealt with, unfortunately, through July. Make sure everything is covered. And if you're looking for somebody who's local to Austin and Round Rock, Travis and Williamson County, please call Texas Allstate agent Mark Saunders and his office. If you have any doubt, you're not sure, maybe you're not sure you're getting the best rate, you could do better and get everything covered at a better number. With more than 35 years of experience, you absolutely will, with the Texas alum Mark Saunders and his Texas Allstate agency there in Williamson County in Austin. So ask yourself tonight before you go to sleep, get up in the morning, are you in good hands? You will be with 3.5 decades plus of great experience. You will be with Texas alum Mark Saunders. 218-8571. That's 512-218-8571. See the number there on the screen, and give him a call and thank him. Tell him, hey, let's talk some Texas football as well. You see where he is in Round Rock. Mark Saunders with Texas alum. You'll be in great hands all the time. No doubt about it. All right, guys, backing up in the defensive line. We know Anthony Hill, Ty Anthony Smith, Leonga Lafau, and now Trey Moore, your primary linebackers. But, interesting, CJ and Rod, talking about how they're moving guys around. I mean, Pete Kwiatkowski talked about how Jalen Gilbo and Kobe Black are competing for the corner spot opposite Manny Muhammad. They talked about Derek Williams and Jelani McDonald, kind of your back safeties, and that Michael Taff has actually been working at nickel and the star position, which brings him closer to the line of scrimmage, but really working everybody, CJ, at that star position. I know you talked to Kyoto Hudson, the nickel coach, about they're trying everybody. They're trying to get everybody cross-trained, and that's a Dwayne Aquina philosophy. Also, I thought it was interesting that Dwayne Aquina said, and the coaches talked about it, Dwayne Aquina, instead of being in different rooms, they want everybody in the same room. They really want to congregate as a secondary, which I think is interesting. Something Rod's talked about quite a lot. But there's so much talent back there. How do you maximize it? Same thing we've talked about in the other positions. Get the best guys on the field.
Yeah, look, that's got to be the goal. And Rod, you could speak to it better than anybody else here. Dwayne Aquina's done just that throughout his career and done so at a very, very high level. So the Texas secondary, I have no question about it, is going to be in good shape with the guys that they have to use and the versatility that they have at specific positions. But that star position is really interesting because Michael Taff working down at star at times. Look, I don't think he's going to be a full-time star guy. I think he's too valuable playing center field and running the alley, really. But, speaking with Kenoto Hudson, the number one thing that they look for at the nickel and star position is you have to be physical. You have to play near the line of scrimmage and basically be another run defender or linebacker. Have that mentality. And Michael Taft certainly has that. I think Jelani McDonald possesses that as well. Now, who else can be that guy when Texas wants to go lighter in their secondary? Right now, it's Wardell Mack, the guy that I've been hearing a lot back to the spring in which he was running with that first team unit at the nickel position. So you got plenty of pieces. And there's a little tidbit in there as well. Kenoto Hudson said, look, we tried to get Jonah Williams some run at nickel when he first arrived in the summer. Now, does that mean that's exactly where he starts his career? Probably not, right? We're seeing it with Michael Terry right now on the offensive side. Learn one position, master that one, and then branch out. And I think that's what you'll eventually see with Jonah Williams. Learn that deep safety spot, learn one of the two safety positions, and then the rest of the defense will come. But all in all, Michael Taft, Jelani McDonald, Wardell Mack, you got three really viable options at that star nickel. And Rod, as you mentioned, you can kind of just spin them down, kind of keep Derek Williams as that pin up in the middle of the field. And depending on formations, you can just keep the same three safeties on the field and use that as kind of a lever to just rotate them back and forth from near the line of scrimmage to back deep.
Yep. Feels like a mandate now that everybody's got a secondary position they play. That I think Coach Aquina's a big part of that. I think they were on that path anyway. I think multiplicity was the next phase of the defense. We talked to Rodney Cleveland the other day, and he said, "Oh no, they said I'm a guy that can play." I think he mentioned like 3 or 4 different shades up front, right?
Yeah.
They were guys who can play multiple shades, guys who can play multiple positions. But Taft, by the way, throwback, when he first got to Texas as a walk-on, he did start at nickel. He's a cornerback when he came out of high school and started out his walk-on career at Texas at nickel. He said that, and actually as a walk-on, played in games as a free safety, boundary safety, and nickel. So he is versatile. I'm with you, CJ. I don't know if it's going to be something they do all the time. I think it could be situation, matchup specific. I think they're going to end up having a 3 safety defense, not permanently, but a package. And he'll end up having a 3. And now Jelani McDonald is their big nickel. Big nickel means you got kind of a big safety at that nickel position. I think they could end up with kind of what Dan Quinn uses with a 3 safety defense at one point too. Where they got 3 safeties on the field. Man, Jim Knowles is famous for kind of having a 3 safety defense as well. 3 now you can have 3 high and 3 safety defense, but I think Texas will have a package like that. They're just too deep at safety. Now we're talking about Derek Williams is healthy, and then Michael Taft, and Derek Williams. And that's why I think, and I said this when Derek Williams was being recruited. I remember saying, "Oh, he can play nickel if you need him to." Like I said, he can play it. I mean, he's got that. Kind of
well, and I'm just thinking about it. What you guys are talking, great conversation. From the quarterback perspective or offense perspective, you got 3 safeties that are interchangeable. And, even next year when Michael Taft does move on, Jonah Williams is 6'4" and runs like the wind. And these guys are all long arm guys. I mean, who's the deep safety? Who's the free? Who's the star? You're confusing the quarterback in that regard, trying to identify. And then same thing with the linebackers, who's dropping, who's coming, there's all levels of confusion when you're in a passing situation. I mean, you can see where they're trying to create that. Rob, besides speed and athleticism, what are the biggest differences going from high school to college to pro? Which level do players enjoy most?
Yeah, good question there. Thank you for the super chat. It's a mental aspect of it. Just real quick story. Adrian Phillips was telling me that when he first went to the Chargers, he was following Eric Weddle around like, basically like a little puppy. And Eric Weddle taught him how to watch film in twice the speed. Because he said, I only got like a few hours a day to watch film, so I got to watch twice the film of my opponent. So he watches it at twice the speed. And
speed it up?
They speed it up. So it feels like the first time I watched it, I didn't know what the hell I was watching. It took me like 2-3 months to start watching film. Spacey sped up at twice the speed. And then I started being able to identify it, and that's how I started watching film. And that's the level that the NFL is on. They're watching film and fast forward so they can watch twice the film of their opponent. I wasn't doing that. That's why I didn't last long.
All right, guys. We got to wrap it up. Rod, tell them one more time about Andy Ludicky. We'll do one more super chat, too. We'll do that on the other side. But tell them about Andy Ludicky, and then we'll get that great super chat.
All right, thank you very much to Andy Ludicky and his team for sponsoring our Tuesday night live stream. If you're someone like me, you may be looking to diversify. You may have your hands in different businesses, which I do. Well, Andy can help you diversify by finding you different businesses that will fit your time allotment and your financial goals. If you've been stuck in the corporate rat race with 2 weeks PTO and no control over the money you make or your schedule in general, call Andy and he'll take you through a very detailed process to help you find a business that will fit your skill sets and your financial goals. Franchise ownership isn't for everyone, but if you have a desire to take control of your financial destiny, reach out to Andy today at andy@myperfectfranchise.net or give him a call at 404-973-9901. Thank you very much to Andy Ludicky for sponsoring our Tuesday live stream.
All right, guys, here we go. Regarding talent, this is the best front seven in my lifetime. The secondary has multiple high-end players of size and flexibility. Overall, the defense trending to be Bama, Georgia level. Well, and thank you, Aloha Traveler. I think that's been the build, guys. I mean, one of my bumper stickers for this Texas team this year, because I saw I think Sporting News did a composite of the 11 different top 20 preseason polls or top 25s, and Longhorns were the composite number one team, and they were number one in like six of the 11 polls. But the one thing that I would say to anybody that questions that is, I mean, they may not be the best team in the country, but they're really well built. There's been a plan, like at every level, at every room, and the consistency and continuity of the coaching staff. This is a well-built roster. Is it going to? I mean, it's going to go win. But to Aloha Travelers super chat, the number one defense, the best defense in the country, has won the national championship each of the last 4 years. So when you look at Ohio State, Michigan, Georgia, if you're the best defense in the country, which Aloha Traveler says Texas has a chance to be, we all kind of agree with that. And to Rod's point about that offense becoming top 10, top 15 kind of offense, why not? If the special teams is better, it can be a national championship team, but it starts with the defense. Number one defense is one. It still wins in an offensive sport.
Yeah, 100%.
Yep.
Look at Eric Raines. What's up, Eric Raines?
Hey, what's up, E? Eric Raines.
Glad you're doing good. All right, guys, we got a hard out at 8:30 here, but appreciate Andy Ludicky tonight. Appreciate Mark Saunders. Appreciate Duck Camp. Appreciate you, CJ. Rod, been a long day with coordinator conversations, but, man, more of this to come, all morning long on Coffee and Football and all the time on Texas Football. Tomorrow's the first practice. Be hot in the afternoon, Rod. CJ, don't get a ticket and wear your sunscreen, okay? It's about 2:30, 2:45. Your face will melt tomorrow.
I'm melting.
Hold up. Did we get Michael's super chat? The Michael My Business? Rod, why aren't you coaching DBs at UT? Because Coach Akina is, and he's much better. That's why they got the right man for the job.
Well said. You certainly could handle that position. All right, let's wrap up. But boy, more to come. Practice tomorrow. Actual on-field football that CJ will be covering as his face melts and he gets another parking ticket. Y'all have a great night. Enjoy your Tuesday. We'll do it every Tuesday for sure. And back tomorrow with Coffee and Football at 8:00 or just after that. Thank you, Matthew. Thanks to all of you guys, and hook up.